Do you rely on coffee just to function throughout the day, or do you wake up in the morning feeling still tired even if you've had 8 hours of sleep? So in today's video, I want to talk about sleep, sleep hygiene, talk about some habits that you can think of, why is sleep so important, and also just a few supplements that might help you if you feel like your sleep isn't optimal. Before we jump into the video, just a quick introduction. My name is Melissa Nell. I'm a registered dietitian and I'm part of the Body 20 Nutrition Doctor team. And welcome if you're new here. Please do follow along as we do these videos every 2 weeks, and you are welcome to send us any questions via WhatsApp or email. So you've definitely heard that sleep is super important. So everyone should be sleeping around 7 to 9 hours every single night. And that's something we all know, but then unfortunately for some of us that's not always possible, or even if you try to sleep 9 hours and you wake up the next morning you still feel tired, or if you look at your smartwatch or whatever it might be, or your sleep tracker, you see that your sleep is poor. So if that is you, I think this video might be helpful. So let's just talk about sleep in general, how it works and what chemicals get released in the body to help you sleep and help you feel awake. It's actually quite interesting. So we see during the day, as you do your thing and you go about your day and you work and you exercise and you think, for example, your body uses energy, especially your brain uses energy to do those things. And the byproduct of that energy is actually called adenosine. So adenosine builds up gradually throughout the day in the brain, and then when it comes to a certain level, that is when you start to feel tired or your eyes are burning, and that's when there's a lot of adenosine building up in the brain. Now, a lot of people rely on caffeine to actually give them a boost or to at least wake them up. And it's not necessarily that caffeine gives you, or coffee, caffeine gives you energy. It actually blocks the adenosine receptors in the brain. So even though the adenosine is, floating around in the brain, the caffeine blocks those receptors. So then your brain actually feels not as tired at that moment. However, adenosine is still building up in the background. And when that caffeine wears off, that is often where you start to feel that intense crash where you're like so tired. And that's typically what happens in the body. But now adenosine it's important. That's how the body functions. Another rhythm or clock that we have is called the circadian rhythm. That's our internal clock. It's a 24-hour clock, and that is driven by cortisol and melatonin. So when you hear cortisol, a lot of people think, oh, it's a bad hormone, we should try and reduce it, and if it's high, it is the end of the world. And yes, that might be true. Cortisol is a stress hormone, but it is really necessary in the body to wake you up. So if we look at the normal rhythms in the body when it comes to these hormones, we see when we wake up in the morning, there's a big rise in cortisol because that's your drive. That gives you that, motivation to get going. So cortisol needs to pick up in the morning, and then it settles throughout the day. And then once the cortisol decreases, we see melatonin actually increase, and then you start to feel tired and your body goes into that relaxed state where you then can at least fall asleep. Now, there's some factors that actually affect your cortisol and your melatonin levels as well. We see that your cortisol and melatonin is very light sensitive. So in the morning, the best thing you can actually do is to get some sunlight in your face, not necessarily directly staring into the sun, but try to get outside or go for a walk or try to get some light in your eyes, because that actually stimulates cortisol to increase. We also see grapefruit, interestingly, also increases your cortisol levels in the morning. So maybe if that can be your first fruit that you reach for in the morning, that's also a good option. But we want that increase in cortisol in the morning so that you can get going and you have that drive, to get through your day. And then the same with melatonin. We see that blue light or sharp light actually decreases melatonin. And that's why it's really important to not stare at your screen or stare at the computer or TV too soon before you go to bed, because it actually might decrease your melatonin levels, and we need melatonin to relax and to fall asleep. And we don't actually want to rely on external forms of melatonin. We want the body to produce its own melatonin and to regulate the cortisol levels like that. So that is the basic rhythms that we see. So adenosine, and then also your circadian rhythm that actually impacts your sleep. So there's a lot of lifestyle factors and so forth that do have an effect on these levels, and I'll go into the detail on that shortly. Now, let's just talk about how much sleep do we need. Okay, so generally speaking, we should aim for around 7 to 9 hours of sleep every single day. And if you are wearing a watch or something that's measuring your sleep, you would have seen that it says there's a certain amount of deep sleep, REM sleep, and light sleep. So deep sleep, we try to aim for around 1 to 2 hours every night. Deep sleep is really important for recovery, for your immune function, and for the body to really just rest and repair. So, and then also for REM sleep, we need 1.5 to 2 hours of that. That's more specifically for learning and memory and that type of thing. And then light sleep will make up the rest of your sleep for that 7 to 9 hours. So a few things that you can aim for when it comes to your sleep hygiene is to make sure your room is nice and cool and dark. So because like I mentioned already, that light can actually definitely disturb your hormonal levels, which will affect your sleep. So, and then the coolness, of course, if you are too hot or if it's too cold even, and you wake up regularly, that's also going to disturb your sleep and reduce your sleep quality. Then, reducing the amount of blue light and bright light that you get exposed to just before you go to bed is also super important. Reducing alcohol just before bed, and even making sure you're not watching things that are too stimulating or that upset you or anything like that. We really want to move into a space where it's really calm and conducive to moving into that relaxed and calm state before you go to bed. Now, why would you want to prioritize sleep? A lot of people say, yeah, but I'm fine if I just sleep 4 hours, I can function normally. And that is probably the case for a lot of people. But unfortunately, we do see with research that it catches up later in life. So there are like a really small amount of people, not like 1%, that can actually function on 4 to 5 hours of sleep completely normal. But generally speaking, 98 to 99% of us actually need 7 to 9 hours of sleep to make sure that we are healthy and to keep us, functioning optimally. We see that poor sleep quality and reduced sleep actually increases your risk for cardiovascular diseases. It also has an impact on your blood sugar levels. So we see that when you are sleep deprived, your hungry hormone, which is called ghrelin, is actually increased, and leptin, which actually reduces your hunger or increases your satiety, is decreased. So you tend to want to eat more, which is of course going to affect your fitness and weight loss goals. For example, if you are trying to lose weight, you're trying to lose fat specifically, you need to be in a calorie deficit. And if you're sleep deprived, that is really hard to achieve because you feel like eating something the whole time. We also see that it has an impact on your blood pressure and generally speaking on your mental health, as well as on your emotional and also on your brain and your brain or cognitive function and health. So sleep deprivation is definitely something we should try and stay away from as far as possible. Okay, so basically to round this up, if we're thinking of sleep, we need to make sure that our sleep habits and hygiene is definitely on track. So firstly, like I said, don't watch too many stimulating things just before you go to bed. Make sure you wind down, turn down the lights, try not to get exposure from blue lights, like for example your cell phone or computer or a TV, for example, an hour before you go to bed. Don't eat too late at night. Try to keep your meals a little bit smaller so that you don't feel like you get reflux or anything when you go to bed. And then, like I say, keep the room cool and try to also make your space where you go to bed really calm and a place where you preferably just sleep and not work or have any other activities that's going to disturb you or going to keep your mind racing, for example. If you've done all of that and you say, but I still don't sleep well, and we can definitely look at some supplements. So we know that magnesium is very effective in actually helping the body relax, especially the muscles. That's why it's also really good for recovery. But we see there's different types of magnesiums on the market. But specifically, if we're looking at for sleep, we see magnesium bisglycinate is actually really effective. The reason for that is we know that magnesium is very effective in relaxing the muscles, which is great for sleep, but glycinate is an amino acid that this magnesium is bound to, and that has been shown to also help the body sleep and to brain to relax, and also your muscles to relax and really improve your sleep quality. So there's a lot of research, a lot of studies behind showing that magnesium bisglycinate is actually really effective in sleeping and improving sleep quality. Another one is Apigenin. So Apigenin is actually really effective. That is like the active compound in chamomile tea. For example, you've probably heard someone say if you want to sleep well, you need to drink a cup of chamomile tea before you go to bed. So Apigenin is the compound that we find in chamomile tea. It's just a little bit more convenient in a pill form. And that has actually been shown to also help with sleep quality, help you fall asleep, help you feel relaxed, and really just improve the quality overall. And then lastly, we have L-Theanine. L-Theanine is the natural compound that we find in green tea, and that has also been shown to really improve the sleep quality and relaxation and so forth. So we do see that a lot of people's sleep quality and so forth is decreased because their mind is racing, or they're busy, or they're stressed, or there's anxiety and those types of things. So we do see that the Apigenin as well as the L-Theanine helps with that. So it helps you fall asleep a little bit quicker, and it also helps you stay asleep, or even if you wake up in the middle of the night, to fall back asleep a little bit quicker. So that's the 3 really effective supplements that you can try if you are struggling with sleep. I would recommend introducing one at a time so that you can see which one works best for you, or maybe you would need all 3. It's really up to you, and it's really up to person. So I hope this has been helpful. Let us know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next one.